but that ain't good enough.
Self-introduction, Brett Newski, Brettnewski, Polish guy.
In case you want to look him up online. Welcome, Brett, to the From the Unbox the podcast. Thank you very much for sitting down with me today over Zoom.
Yeah, man, I love doing podcasts, so this is great. Let's let it rip.
Yeah, well, that's very fitting because you have your own podcast, from what I understand, Dirt from the Road. How's that going?
Dirt from the Road has really saved my life this past year and a half. You know, honestly, I'm kind of an introvert, and I never really thought I would even be into podcasting at all. I was like, but once I started doing it, I was like, it's such a cool medium for introverts because you can kind of like choose when to spend your energy talking. You know what I mean? It's like, when you're feeling like it, you let it rip. You don't have to be like on all the time.
Yeah. And you get to choose kind of who you're talking to as well, which is a nice perk, to
totally
fend through strangers. But, well, I guess give a little introduction about yourself. So I know you're based in Milwaukee, doing a lot of cool indie rock sort of stuff. And your new album / book is coming out in a few months, June 22nd, from what I understand.
Yes.
And It's Hard to Be a Person is what it's called. I know that the album obviously is music, but the book is kind of something pretty interesting. It's a collection of illustrations. Do you mind kind of elaborating on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, stemming back probably starting 3 years ago, I started just making like these dumb little drawings of me, like making fun of my own depression. And I just put them up just to goof around. And then like people started responding to them and being like pretty into them. So I kept making them. And after 3 years, I had enough for a book. So it's kind of like 3 years work of drawing and then like 15, 20 years of ideas all kind of shoved in there. So it's called It's Hard to Be a Person, Defeating Anxiety, Surviving the World, and Having More Fun. And yeah, it's just like little hacks and strategies I've used over the years to kind of like feel better in my brain as, someone who's always had probably an above average amount of anxiety. So
yeah, well, that's kind of like the light of it. It seems to be is it's your way of bringing humor into an otherwise pretty dark sort of situation. And as a person, how has that been? Has that always kind of been part of your personality? Were you always kind of like the cracking jokes when at the wrong time sort of thing, or?
I've definitely done my fair share of bombing, but growing up, I was never like I was never funny. I don't think, not that I knew of, because I was just like too unsure of myself and just like a bit too wobbly socially to be like the class clown or the comedian. I do remember like saying things really dry and being serious, and like some of my friends like cracking up, being like, dude, that was really funny, and like me not knowing what they were talking about. But so I think maybe there was like something in there, but I was just too terrified to try jokes or bits on people. But in my adult life, yeah, it's always been like an escape to skirt around more serious conversational topics. And only in the past like couple of years have I gotten better at like facing more serious shit head on and not just like bailing on it by like making jokes and like switching the topic, you know what I mean? But in regards to mental health and like anxiety, like it always has seemed, when I observe it online and hear people talk about it, it's always seemed like such a dark thing to me. And I just feel like satire and humor in that arena has always really just been an incredible help and catharsis to me. So anytime I can like make fun of my own anxiety and depression, I generally do feel better. And I'm starting to find that like people feel better too when they kind of take that angle to it sometimes.
Yeah. And what part of that kind of whole process made you want to share that through this book? Like, did you, was that always like an intentional thing, part of this album writing process? Like, was that kind of always a part of the situation?
A part of the book making process? I mean, yeah, I mean, because like the songwriting and making music, and that's like my first love, that's that's always the way I kind of dealt with phobias and anxieties and just like plowing through the world. Um, but music is just so niche, you know. It's like you and I love the Bare Naked Ladies, but like the odds of our friends liking them, it's like they're probably on something else or into some other band. There's just so much content and quantity in the world that it's like we're all into different things and different musical niches. But like a book, I just feel like it can be like so much more useful than an album to so many more people. And yeah, at the end of the day, I do want to be useful to people. I mean, I don't know if that sounds weird, but I want to be
No,
as
it makes sense.
useful
Yeah.
to people as possible, um, because you know the music is for me. Like I'm always like making songs because I want to make them. I think it sounds cool, but the book is for other people. Like that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do creatively because it wasn't necessarily much fun to make all the time. It was like a struggle. It was like, oh shit, like how am I going to put this into words, get it on paper, get it drawn correctly day in and day out. But now having finished it, it feels more rewarding. I feel like almost than any album I've ever done, you know?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting comparison, you know, and especially with the illustration part of it, it becomes even more universal where people, I'm sure I haven't, you know, has seen a copy of it yet, obviously, but I imagine, you know, having pictures in there and stuff and fewer words kind of makes things a lot easier to process and take in and makes it more universal in that way too, which is great.
Yeah, I hope it's of use to people, and we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. It comes out in June. So keep your eyes peeled, people, as well. And going back to kind of where it started and stuff, even further, I guess, is where your music career started. It kind of comes out on this album with that opening track, your new single, I Should Have Listened to Ferris Bueller, which, speaking of the Bare Naked Ladies, features the former lead singer, Stephen Page. And that kind of has a pretty interesting cycle to it, where you were a teenager and you kind of came to realize, you know, you really loved their music and stuff. Do you mind telling the story? I hate telling people
Yeah,
stories.
no,
So
no, totally, totally. Yeah, so I mean, like playing guitar, playing music, it wasn't really anything anyone in my family had ever done, and it was never on my mind. I mean, I was just into the Bare Naked Ladies as a kid. They were like one of the first bands I really loved, probably the first band. So my pops took me to see them at the Marcus Amphitheater in Milwaukee, and I don't know, 20 years ago, 2001 or something, Maroon tour. And it just kind of blew my mind because it was the first like big show, like the first high production show I'd ever been to, and it really blew my head off, how tight they were and how good it sounded and the banter between songs. And on the drive home, my pops was like, you know, Brett, you should consider buying a guitar and learning how to play it. And I was like, what, really? Like that sounds hard. I don't even know how a guitar makes sound. I remember thinking that, like, I don't even know how a guitar makes sound. I just know the shape that it looks like, and it's got like a stick on the end of it. And he's like, well, yeah, you place your fingers around, and it's hard, but yeah, I guess you'll figure it out. He didn't know. So I got a job at McDonald's making $5.15 an hour,
it's
and then the deal my dad cut me was if he would front me the money, I would pay him back. But if I was still playing guitar at the end of a year, he would pay for half the guitar. And so I started playing Bare Naked Lady songs, Weezer, Green Day, and I was like, I remember like turning the distortion button on my shitty little amp and like getting like the glycerine tone from 16 Stone by Bush and be like, holy shit, that sounds like the record that's on the radio, kind of sounds like it, and so you get all these little tiny rewards along the way. And yeah, I just got totally obsessed with it. And then you know, fast forward what, like 15, 20 years, Stephen Page is of Bare Naked Ladies is playing Milwaukee. He's playing a solo show. And for whatever reason, this was the only show on his tour where the opener had some other prior arrangement. And the opener was out, he couldn't do the show. So the promoter, Peter Jest of Shank Hall in Milwaukee, knew I was a big BNL fan. And he hit me up like 3 days before the show. He's like, Newski, do you want to open for Stephen Page? I was like, holy shit, fuck yeah. You know, I went down there, I opened the show, we hung out. and we got to riff and chat a bit backstage and hang, and then I got him to do my podcast, a year later, Dirt from the Road. And then, when we were finalizing this album, this first track called I Should Have Listened to Ferris Bueller, it has kind of a BNL influence, maybe merged with like a Violent Femmes influence, with like kind of this acoustic, thrashy punk kind of thing. And I emailed Steve and Paige. I was like, hey, Steve, I'm not sure if this is like a big ask or not, but would you be down to sing harmony on this song? It's kind of got some BNL influence, and I'd be pumped about it. He emailed me back within like 10 minutes, and he was like,
Wow.
yeah, totally. Just send me the track, and I got my home studio. I'll record harmony. And he turned it around in like 48 hours. It was unbelievable. And we dropped it into our session in Milwaukee, and Spatola mixed it together, and it was like, I was singing low and he was singing harmonies high, and it just like fit together so well. It was so easy and cool how it just like the tech now of just being able to collab internationally. I think he was in Toronto at the time, so it was just it was unreal, man.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, is the availability, especially now with artists being at home, not on the road. That open field of collaboration internationally is huge now. You see all these crazy things coming out of Europe and the US, and it's like you never would have imagined this kind of thing being possible. So
Big time.
yeah, it's pretty sweet that you're able to capitalize on that for sure.
Yeah, it's the best way to like team up with your people in your genre, or even outside of your genre, and like, I mean, share audiences too. Like, I mean, like the indie rock world really needs to take notes from the hip hop world, because they're doing it right. They're like, there's no shame in it. They're like collaborating with everybody they can, whereas like us indie rock hipster doofuses are like, too proud or too cool to like guest on each other's tracks a lot of the time. So I think it's the acceptance of collabs and guesting on each other's songs is starting to become more of a normal idea for like the indie alternative world, like it has been for hip hop.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed an influx of that this year in 2020, especially where it's almost unsuspecting, and you're like, oh, they're friends and they're gonna put music together. That's all right. That's pretty sweet.
That's interesting you say that. It's like I kind of feel like that's true. Like if like a citizen or like a regular music listener sees like Billie Eilish with the Verve Pipe, like they just assume they're best friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's how I feel when I see like Bon Jovi and Mellencamp. I'm like, oh, of course they're friends.
Yeah, they do the same thing. They must be the same person. They probably have Thanksgiving dinner together for all we know.
Right, but really it was probably the label just like, we need cash now, cash.
Yeah,
cash collab, cash grab.
Well, they're doing a good job of hiding those, I guess industry insecurities, we'll call them.
But, yeah, I mean, what? There's no point in not doing it. It's good for everybody.
Yeah, it makes things interesting, keeps it different, keeps the vibe moving. And speaking of interesting and different, one thing that caught my eye last year that you did, I've been wanting to talk to you since October, basically, is that video you did for What Are You Smoking? Or What Are We Smoking, I guess?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that hamster ball thing was hilarious, I gotta say, first off. And what made you decide to go running around in a plastic ball and either make someone's day or totally ruin it?
Yeah, well, I always love annoying people for sport. It's one of my favorite pastimes. But I think that was Max Hauser, the filmmaker's idea, and our buddy Jaffer. I think she chipped in on that idea. But yeah, I mean, those giant human hamster balls, you only get like 15, 20 minutes of oxygen before you asphyxiate yourself. So we had our friend Dexter and his lady Maria, and they would time, once we closed up the hamster ball, they'd fill it up with air with like a lawnmower air leaf blower.
Yeah.
So I'd be like sitting there in a half deflated human hamster ball like an asshole while they shove the the stick of the leaf blower in there. The whole neighborhood's like watching it unfold, and then they close it up. They turn on the timer, 20 minutes till you're out of air. So go nuts and And then I'd run down the street and try to play songs through the plastic at people. And, most people were pretty pumped about it. But yeah, I mean, like there was a good, 28% of them who wanted me dead. They were not having it.
I noticed, at least in the music video, the sample size seemed to be a lot of like older people just being like, what is this idiot doing right now?
Yeah, Door County, Wisconsin.
No idea where that is, but
shout out. It's the little mitten thumb of Wisconsin. It's got like the thumb that sticks out into the lake. Yeah. I forget I feel like Americans and Canadians don't. I forget that you're up north because we don't pay attention to each other's like geography as much, which is fine. It makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be able to notice the intricacies of American geography, but I actually, that's funny you say that because we have a bit of I'm sure you guys do the same thing. Like actually that episode of Friends, they do this where they try to name all 50 states, or was it 50? Is it 50 states or 52? Why am I thinking 52?
50 nifty United States. And then, did you have that song in grade school?
No, that was not
50
part of
nifty. Oh shit, great song.
Yeah,
I think it was written by like George Washington or something. His first album.
Yeah, dropped on right in 1700s.
There was only 13 states there, right? My history is shot.
Yeah,
maybe it was Grover Cleveland. I can't remember.
Or Hamilton. I don't know. Alexander Hamilton. He's popular right now.
Al Scamilton. You know a lot of obscure presidents over there, Kane.
Oh yeah.
Good for a Canadian.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like we have a game where like you try to list all the states off of memory and then see how many you can get. And I would love to see a much simpler version of everyone in the States trying to guess all the names of the provinces and territories up here. And
dude, here's where. And on that very note, here's where like American public education just needs a reform. I remember spending like a full 2 months of fourth or fifth grade where the whole 8 weeks was like memorizing every president that America ever had. And then at the end of that 2 months, we had to like list every president in order of like the 50 presidents or whatever. And then you just forgot it all 2 weeks later. And that was like, we dedicated so much energy to just memorizing like that William Taft was number 28 and got stuck in a bathtub in 41 or whatever.
Yeah, it's weird where the priorities lie. That's a whole other tangent about the public education system, even up here in Canada. But yeah, it's weird where like priorities lie sometimes in history and in history classes, especially. And going back to this new album that's coming out.
I like how you say out. I forget. That's like the one word you can decipher if someone's Canadian or American. Out.
Out. Is it that prominent? That's
the word that always, that's the key word for me that tips me off.
Yeah. It's like that in Inglourious Bastards where the guy, does 3 instead of 3. They're like, you're not German.
Did he have his finger shot off? I can't remember that scene.
I think they just started shooting at the whole bar, really. It's Tarantino for...
Oh, that was Tarantino. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I think everybody just gets shot up in the bar.
Yeah, I need to get Tarantino to guest vocal on my next record. Seems doable.
I could go on about Tarantino. Like, he loves himself. It's so funny. Like, he has to show up in every movie he makes pretty much, and he's a terrible actor. He really is. He's a terrible actor. I'm not sure how you feel about him, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess all I remember him in is in that From Dusk Till Dawn, where he's not great in that. But I don't remember him like making many appearances in his own films. It's usually like just like brief cameos. I feel like he's aware that he's a shot actor, so he's like playing to his strengths. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, he never really has a big role, but he always likes to show up, and it's almost comical. I remember in Django Unchained, his character was, I think he ends up dying very quickly as a character, but he's a strange man.
Quentin, call in if you want to sit in on my Grammy nominated future record.
Yeah, or even on your podcast. Who knows? I'm sure he's listening right now. His people are listening for sure.
Quarantino.
Hey, I wanted to kind of talk to you more about your advocacy for mental health and everything too, because it's not just this album or the book. But like pretty much all of your work that you've been doing is very centered around being conscious of your mind essentially, And has that always kind of been something important to you creatively, or is it just kind of naturally?
I think so. I think yeah, it just started as like a self therapy, and then like as it kind of went on and you bring the book into play, then it becomes something, beyond yourself. But I mean, growing up, I didn't even know what anxiety was or depression, or I had no clue what that feeling even was. I just knew I was like tired a lot, or I was like just like really uncomfortable all the time. And then like in my adult life, and then you realize that there's like a diagnosis for that, and it's kind of a relief to like have some of these diagnoses, and then you realize how normal it is, and then all of a sudden I didn't feel weird about it, and that kind of the first step into starting to trying to crack the code to freak out in my own head less. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it does get better, it's totally okay to be sad sometimes and anxious. That's just part of like the cycle. And I think some of us have more dopamine and serotonin than others. I mean, my friend Katie, I was talking to in Viroqua, she's like, yeah, I mean, I really get really down like 2 days out of the year. And other than that, like I'm pretty lucky. I got a lot of serotonin or something, where it's like, if I can have like, you know, 4 or 5 good days out of 7, that's a pretty good number for me. I just know that there's after the highs, there's always some sort of little bit of dip, and that's fine. It's gonna pass. It's all temporary and cyclical, and the big troughs, they don't you when you're in them, you feel like they're gonna take forever. Or you feel like they're like permanent or something, and then clouds part, and all of a sudden you start to feel better.
Yeah. Did you find, I'm kind of curious because personally, like whenever I would, perform and stuff, because I used to do a bit of stand up here and there and, played in bands and whatever. And I always found that those nights, obviously great. But the next morning, it's not even like there's nothing to do with alcohol or drugs or anything. But that next morning, like you almost feel like that's like the start of the low. Does that kind of happen to you a lot when you're touring and playing music and stuff? Those morning after?
After a performance for you, you would feel like a little down the next day.
Yeah, it's like that rush is gone, I guess. It's like the depletion of
Oh,
those things. And
okay.
then I'm kind of curious, like,
So you would get a big rush. I hear you.
yeah.
I feel like the morning after a show for me, I especially if I'm going into an off day, I feel amazing. Like I got my work in. We went out, we played well, sold some records, etc. I feel a lot of weight on my shoulders if we're in like a long tour, or just like doubting myself, is like if my body and my mind is going to hold up, and if I can like keep it together and walk into the club and be like the person. And like I do often worry I'm going to like let people down. Like people pay a ticket to see your band, which is like one of the highest honors I've ever known, and then you kind of create this kind of unnecessary pressure on yourself. It's like, I mean, you got there for a reason. Like
Yeah.
you're doing things right, the songs are good enough, you're playing well, but then you give yourself a reason to like feel shitty and doubt yourself and be like, oh my god, like what if I don't deliver a 101% top primo performance? um these people aren't going to like me anymore, they're not going to come see us. So have you ever seen that Bob Dylan documentary, No Direction Home, of like the glory years of Dylan?
I have not. I'm sorry.
It's really neat. Scorsese did it, and like, Dylan's a lot of smoke and mirrors and character, but he's like the most brilliant artist who's ever done that. But like, it seemed like every show he would just like be toying with the audience, or bombing on purpose just to keep himself entertained. And I think that's like where a lot of artists aspire to get to, where they can be like literally not giving a shit to the point where like they can afford to like lose a bunch of fans tonight and like still be fine
Yeah.
the next day. Because like once you do the thing and you do the touring and you play the set, you tighten things so tight that it can become this like theatrical pre-scripted performance, which can be very cool and kind of like can be the most impressive form of performance if it's like ultra tight, ultra rehearsed. But that can feel pretty robotic, and it can feel a little bit depressing or a little like hamster wheel, like if you're a band doing that every single night, where it starts to feel like work and you're just you almost feel like you're like a hologram of yourself or something. So I think there's like a sweet spot between doing the Bobby Dylan thing where you can kind of goof off and improv and like be okay with bombing a song here and there, just so you are having a great time and staying inspired in the live setting.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Do you find because a lot of your guests on your podcast are musicians, like touring musicians and everything too, some pretty big names on there. And do you find that's like a pretty common thing with your guests, at least when they're opening up about that sort of stuff, is like that robotic feeling and that repetitive nature?
Yeah, I think that's a consistent theme for performers because I mean, let's be honest, like none of us are Bob Dylan, and none of us are probably playing arenas to the point where we can like take major risks like that. But yeah, artists do all sorts of different things to stay interested in their own live show, especially when they're playing a ton of dates, so yeah, I know Stephen Page and I were talking about that very thing of bombing on stage on purpose, where you're like, shit, I've played the same set 2-3 nights in a row. I'm gonna try this joke, and it's gonna be a risky joke, and maybe nobody laughs. And I've done that where I've cracked myself up like telling like a Hitler joke, and no one in the room laughed, and then they would like realize I was kidding, and like 9 seconds later I would get like 3 laughs from like people who were down with like weird fucked up comedy. So
Yeah.
I try not to do that too often, but at some point it's almost like I don't know, giving yourself a cortisone shot to like get through the show, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that feeling of like something just not hitting is it's a very weird rush because you don't really know what to do with yourself for that immediate that moment, that 1 second. And then after some like instinct just kicks in and you just pull yourself out of it. But it's it is thrilling in a weird way.
It is that's so weird. You get a buzz from it. Like it's
Yeah.
once you do it long enough, you get a buzz from it. I feel like when you're growing and figuring it out, it's just fully terrifying and you hate yourself. But
Yeah, maybe that's where like
once
the difference doesn't quite come in.
yeah, man,
You haven't
you
figured
got to
out
keep
what's
it
scary,
interesting.
what's fun yet.
Yeah, I think once you do something 1,000 times or 2,000 times, whether it's performing or writing or painting, like nothing feels scary about that anymore. So you gotta kind of kick your own ass to stay motivated, take some
Yeah.
risks.
And do you feel like you've been taking any risks on this new album at all, or?
Not really. No, I hope so. In a sense that this album we wanted to make really raw, so we wanted to take risky in a sense that like dialing back the production, which is not something you do on your fourth or fifth album generally you like try to polish things up as you go or whatever, but we're like, you know what, like we got here by making like really thrashy loud acoustic power pop. Let's do that, but make it a little more lo-fi than we did the first time, put a tiny bit of distortion on the vocals, and yeah, there's something to it. I think there's a charm to it because, as technology becomes just so incredible and like anyone can make a perfectly sounding polished studio album on their garage band at home, it's the human sounding music, it's the more raw sounding music that I feel like is going to stand the test of time and cut through a little more.
It's funny that you say that because last week I think there were some news article about AI recreating.
Yep, saw that.
Yeah, with like Kurt Cobain songs and stuff, like they could basically almost, obviously not perfectly yet the key word, but yeah, they can, like, computers can do this essentially now. Like the music is not safe to the robots anymore.
Yep.
And I think this year, especially with that news aside, people are becoming increasingly more drawn to that original raw state of creation.
Yeah.
It's kind of come a part of this COVID world where like people are remembering like, oh yeah, this is why I love my favorite bands. This is why I love, their sound is, and it's nice that more and more artists are catching on to that. I guess yourself included, but
I think you're right, man. I think there's something to that. And, as AI advances and like creates more and more human sounding music, like you literally just type, you shard out a song with an algorithm that sounds like a human person is doing it. As that becomes more advanced, it's going to become even more important as a human artist to take more risks, because you're like, all right, I need to make something that the algorithm doesn't know what's going to happen. Like if I want to have any sort of relevance, I need to like be more avant-garde and take and brighten more corners, so I'm not just like some reproduced shitty version of Nirvana or Santana or whatever. I mean, I like Santana, but you know what I'm saying.
yeah, it's funny that
So
you had to use
hopefully
the
it
word human
encourages more risk
artist.
taking. Yeah, yeah, human artist. I mean, I hope it encourages more risk taking in creative works, because I mean, let's be honest, there's like most of the population is going to always like corn syrup, whether it's in the form of bro country or generic butt rock or whatever. I know I sound like a pretentious hipster doofus right now, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
the majority of people aren't going to go out of their way to listen to M Ward or to like discover some nuanced form of music that's different than the stuff they hear that they've been bludgeoned with on the radio for the past 40 years. So that said, there's always going to be human beings interested in other human beings taking, I think, creative risks and making something that's never been done before. And maybe I'm just telling myself that to feel better, but I hope it's sort of true.
I think you know what I think it is pretty true because especially as my submissions increase and everything, like I'm getting more and more music sent to me every day. I listen to a lot of songs, and I'm coming to this realization that there is this like weird bell curve, and there's a huge cluster of people who are, especially up and coming artists, that are so worried about getting onto Spotify playlists or having like the hit single to get themselves discovered and like launched into the algorithm, that they're really like losing that sense of risk, and they're almost going very safe. So there's a lot of stuff that falls under this like umbrella that's just safe. Like there's nothing dangerous about it, but there's nothing, unappealing about it either. And
Right.
it's those people that like are doing something different and, staying true to themselves that are standing out more
Yeah, I mean,
across genres.
you listen to more music probably than anyone I know. So that being the case, can you tell pretty quickly when something grabs you, is it something just completely different?
Yeah, like that happens to me every once in a while where some, especially undiscovered or very small artists, it's, my problem is right now is I'm having a hard time putting it into words because, a lot of people require feedback or whatever. Uh, but there's like this inherent feeling where you're like, okay, this, maybe it's the chord progression, maybe it's the production, what stands out more, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But there is always something for songs that I'm really drawn to. There's like almost this inexplicable thing about it that just sounds different but also familiar. I find that's like the nice cushion thing. It's like, okay, I want to listen to this because it sounds like other stuff, but it is clearly its own thing. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
hard to describe with art, right? It's almost not meant to be put into words, but
Right. I mean, what would you tell like young bands or musicians or any band in the crazy modern tech world? What would you tell them for like ways to move the needle and get discovered as a
that's
journalist?
wow, that's a tough question. I was not prepared to answer questions today, Brett. This is great. Uh, yeah, that's a tough question, but honestly, I think people are overthinking it too much. That's where it really starts to be dangerous, is when you start overthinking in any field. And I think new artists especially shouldn't be worried about uh, fitting into a mold or fitting into a playlist, because you're just going to be all like I get 200 submissions a day basically, and half of them I don't have time for, or I'm just not interested in, and the other half, or a quarter of that other half, get thrown onto a playlist, and I never hear about these artists again. You know, they're a blimp. I liked it, on the
Yeah.
playlist, next. But that's kind of where people are going. So if you're starting out, like, I think a very important thing is to just keep your head down, do your own, find your own sound, which takes time. It's not an overnight thing, and just work with that, and people will be drawn to it. I've always loved that mantra. It's like,
Oh,
do your
cool.
thing and people will follow you. And yeah, how about you? How do you feel like you've been able to kind of keep that sort of things like true to yourself and stand out in your own way?
Yeah, I think you're right, man. I think there's a niche for everything now, and it's about being good very consistently rather than being like a genius in your career. Like I've talked about that before, but like in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s, you could do that. You could be great for one song and be an international phenomenon. And now you just have to, don't spend any too much time on one song. Like you have to just continually create and consistently be good and consistently release things. And you can't get hung up on that last phase of mixing where you're like, oh, between the seventh and ninth second there's a weird like guitar nuance that we need to EQ the 400 hertz out of that, or it's going to ruin the song. You got to just like know when to draw the line and call the game and just keep moving, because no one thing is probably going to change your career. It's like you said, it's nothing's going to be an overnight thing. You're just going to long slow burn, baby. That's how it is now, and that's how it's always been for me and everybody I've ever known. I don't think I've ever known any overnight successes.
I think that, yeah, I think the overnight success thing has really gone out of control because of social media, like especially with TikTok. I get a lot of artists, pushing their stuff on TikTok, and you're sharing like 15 seconds and they're trying to go viral. And
Right.
if you think about it, there's millions of people doing the exact same thing, trying to go viral, right? And just that there's like this illusion that because somebody did it, I could do it. And
Right.
those people got lucky and they had a bit of talent and whatever, and the stars aligned. But you're also part of this million of people trying to do the same thing. So, that effort to become viral or one night, like overnight success, is very futile and kind of distracting almost.
Yeah. Do you think TikTok is a good use of time for bands to try to be getting songs on there, or is that too broad of a question?
Uh yes and no. I find that it has its utilities to it. Like, if you want people to, get a sense of your sound, especially if you have a following, then it's great. But it's like radio. It's actually worse than radio because it's fleeting. At least radio, you're hearing the songs on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
With TikTok, you hear it once, it disappears. You hear it
Yeah.
for 60 seconds, it's gone. And even if you follow the band, like, they're always got to be forced to do more and more things. So I think it's going to be a very strange shift if that becomes the norm for a lot of artists.
Right.
Have you been using TikTok at all? Do you?
Not at all. I used to try to post on it once a week because people were telling me to do so, and I just can't keep up. I just like, you only get so much bandwidth, you only get so much like petrol in your energy tank or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I mean, I guess like to me, like Instagram right now, in my limited knowledge, it seems to have like a ton of staying power, more so than Facebook. So yeah, trying to put effort in there, but not put too much effort into social media to the point where it's like taking away from the core of like making stuff. So
Yeah. And that's actually a good point too, Brett. That's actually really important as well, is that because of TikTok and Instagram and stuff, a lot of these artists are putting in so much effort into their social media rather than, working on new music or polishing their sound or researching how to become better and stuff like that. But it's all part of the game, right?
That's
but,
true. Yeah, man. I know I've got into phases of doing that, of just like getting way too into the social media or the admin side of the gig, and then just like really falling behind creatively. Yeah. Oh, but Kane, I do have to run here because I have a call in like 60 seconds. And
Oh, okay. Well, this is a great
I would
way
love to keep
to
riffing, but we can definitely do it again for sure. I'd love to.
yeah, well, I'll hopefully have you on again, Brett. But don't worry, check out his new album. It's hard to be a person. This is the best exit ever. All right. Well, Thanks a lot, Brett. Thanks for your time.
All right, Kane. I really appreciate it, man. I'll see you in Toronto. I'll be up there next year. We'll drink some coffee.
Coffee with some fun in it. Yeah, let's do it.
Deal.
All right. See
All
you,
right,
Brett.
brother.
Thank
Check you
you
soon.